my name is Professor Joseph Campisi. I'm in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies, and I do work on the philosophy of food, the ethics of food, food and the good life, but I also teach classes in existentialism, the philosophy of language, American pragmatism, a whole slew of classes.
So, Professor Campisi, with November being Hunger Awareness Month, what ethical responsibilities do we have when it comes to food?
As far as our ethical responsibilities, different philosophers, different ethical theorists are going to say different things depending on who we have responsibilities to. So some philosophers say that we only really have ethical responsibilities to other people. Some philosophers are going to say that we have ethical responsibilities to non-human animals. Some philosophers are going to say that we have ethical responsibilities to the environment. And so when it comes to ethical eating, it depends upon the perspective that you're looking at. But realize as well, if you're someone who believes that you only have responsibilities to other people, this is also going to impact the kind of food choices that you can make. So you may not necessarily be concerned with animals, but insofar as something like meat production requires a lot of resources, a lot of energy, for your humanitarian reasons, you may want to cut back on the amount of meat you eat. Not because necessarily that you're concerned about animal welfare or animal rights, but you're consuming a lot of meat is going to impact the ability of other people to get the food that they need, or even talking about future generations.
So now what piece of advice would you give Marist students to make more sustainable food choices?
Yeah, one thing I think you can do as students that you do have control over is you may not necessarily have control over the kinds of food that you can purchase. You may not be able to afford, say, organic food, but you do have kind of control over how much food you consume and how much food you waste, right? So I think studies show that average American wastes about 30% of the food that they purchase. And if you just think of all the kind of the energy, the resources that went into the production of that food, it's really terrible that this food is being wasted. So one thing that maybe as students you can kind of be conscious of is making sure that you're not wasting food. You're being very kind of efficient in terms of what it is that you're eating and how much you're eating.
What can Marist College do, as well as the students, to help fight hunger in the Hudson Valley?
As far as raising awareness of hunger in the local area, sometimes it's difficult for students because you're kind of like in a little bubble. You're kind of cut off from the community, and hunger is one of those things that's kind of difficult to see. It's almost invisible, right? So that rather than even talking about hunger in an area like Poughkeepsie, what people like to talk about is something called food insecurity. And so what's happening is it's not the case that people are starving in the sense that they're not eating for days upon days, but they have economic pressures wherein they have to make a decision of paying the rent or skipping a meal. You'll hear stories about families where the mother and father will either forego a meal or just have one portion to make sure that their kids have food. And so it's a very difficult thing. There's questions about I don't know if you use the word shame, right? That sometimes people are ashamed to say. So I think it makes it something even something like hunger is something that students may have to make even a stronger effort, just because it's so hard to kind of detect.
And within the global community, what are some of the things that are being done to combat hunger?
Right. Well, there's kind of assistance programs. There's a philosopher named Peter Singer. So as far as us as individuals, we're not working at the level of the UN or something, but Singer argues that when it comes to people in developed countries like us, the happiness that we get from our income at a certain level is really not going to create that much more benefit for us, like once all of our basic needs are met. And so what he argues is that what we should do is take, say, that excess and, say, donate it to charities that do this kind of help, right? The idea being that the $5 latte that you buy from Starbucks in your mind is going to be quickly forgotten, but if we take that $5 and donate to someone who's in real need, it could really spell the difference between life or death. So Singer kind of makes these arguments that we should, I think he calls it the Singer solution to world poverty. There are other philosophers and thinkers, however, think that this approach is kind of misguided that there are structural problems, economic problems regarding trade and how agriculture works. And so rather than dealing with it on the piecemeal, this kind of charitable, which is important, they would say that we would try to make structural changes, right, economic changes, so that the problem wouldn't arise in the first place.